In the year 1954, something monumental happened in the United States. It was an event that changed the course of history, and it all revolved around a simple yet powerful idea: quality.
Not of man, no man, however prominent or powerful, and no mob, however unruly or boisterous, is entitled to defy a court of law.
Hello there, welcome to Behind the Date. Today, on October 1st, we are remembering the day when James Meredith became the first African-American person to be admitted at racially segregated Ole Miss University in Mississippi.
The Justice Department says they will be with him as long as he needs protection, even if that be until he completes his studies in 18 months or more.
The rivalry between different colored people has a long history in Western countries, and this day would spark a pivotal discourse that would change the American attitude towards racial prejudice.
I expect to get 5 fights out of before he roll over and play dead.
We are going to discuss the whole fiasco between James Meredith and the Ole Miss University in Mississippi, the case they fought, and the crazy riots that took place on the day James Meredith was to enter the university.
Prison hospital, as relative calm settled on the town in the greatest crisis the South has faced since the Civil War.
But before that, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Behind the Date. So let's get started. You see, throughout history, people have been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. Back in 1896, a decision was made by the Supreme Court saying that it was okay to have separate facilities for different races as long as they were somewhat equal. This meant that black and white Americans could be kept apart as long as they had similar conditions, which in reality rarely happened. But then, fast forward to 1954. Something incredible took place. An interesting case came before the Supreme Court, and it was called Brown versus Board of Education. In this case, the court declared that separating students in schools based on their race was wrong. It violated the 14th Amendment, which promised that everyone should be treated equally under the law. This decision was a game changer. It basically said that the old separate but equal idea was no longer valid. It meant that not only in schools but also in other places, this kind of segregation was unconstitutional. This was a huge blow to the unfair and racist policies that had been enforced. Imagine the impact of this ruling. It was like a ray of light breaking through the darkness of discrimination. It said to the world that equality was not just a dream, it was a right. And it marked the beginning of a new era in the fight for civil rights in America. This takes us all the way to Mississippi, where something important was brewing. There was a man named James Meredith. He had been studying at a college called Jackson State, which was for African Americans. But just like Martin Luther King,
they live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
James also had a dream. He wanted to go to a different college, one that was mostly for white students, called Ole Miss, situated in Mississippi. He tried again and again and again to get in, but they kept on denying his admission. James Meredith was no stranger to Mississippi. He was born there in 1933, went to school there, and even served in the US Air Force. So he was a Mississippian through and through. In 1961, with the help of a group called the NAACP, James decided to take a stand. He filed a lawsuit against Ole Miss, saying that they were treating him unfairly because of his skin color. It was a big deal. This lawsuit went all the way to the highest court in the land, the US Supreme Court. And you know what happened? In September 1962, the Supreme Court made a decision and said that James Meredith was right. They ruled in his favor, saying that he should be allowed to go to Ole Miss. After a long and hard-fought battle in the US courts, the US Supreme Court finally made a decisive ruling on September 10th, 1962. They said that James Meredith should be allowed to attend the University of Mississippi. But the story doesn't end there. Mississippi's governor at the time, Ross Barnett, was determined to stop James Meredith from enrolling, so he took a rather extraordinary step. He stepped into the role of the university's registrar, the person responsible for student admissions. He used this position to block James Meredith's admission. How cruel! A straight-up menace! Not only that, a riot broke out on September 30th when numerous supporters of segregation began attacking the marshals who were stationed there to protect James Meredith. In response, John F. Kennedy mobilized more than 30,000 troops to stop the riots, the most troops sent in any internal conflict in American history.
Ole Miss turned into a battlefield. Very few people heard the president's words.
Imagine the courage it took, because despite the fierce resistance and all the obstacles in his way, James Meredith didn't back down. With hundreds of police officers by his side, on October 1st, 1962, he made history by registering as the very first African-American student at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. But here's the heartbreaking part. His time at the university was incredibly difficult and short. He faced continuous harassment by the white students and faced many challenges. He started his journey in October 1962 and graduated on August 18, 1963, with a degree in political science. James Meredith's experience will always serve as a stark reminder of the deep-seated prejudice that existed at that time. So, the history of African Americans has always been that of a struggling voice. Like, did you know that Martin Luther King Jr. was not actually an orator and was a shy kid? That's absurd, isn't it? The person who is known for his famous speech,
In what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation,
actually had stage fright. Well, there are some other mind-boggling facts about him too, which you will know about in this next video. But before you go watch the next video, make sure you subscribe to Behind the Date for more interesting stories from all over the world. Bye-bye. I'm off to listen to Martin Luther King Jr.